Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our webinar, Building Cross-System Alignment into Your WIOA System, Part 1. This is Building Equity and Inclusion into Your Workforce Data System. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of the LEAD Center, which is the Leadership for the Employment and Economic Advancement of People with Disabilities. We're a WIOA Policy Development Center for the Office of Disability Employment Policy. And more fundamentally, we're a collaborative effort between Social Policy Research Associates and the National Disability Institute. And together, we facilitate the adoption and integration of inclusive WIOA programs, policies, and practices through research, technical assistance, and demonstration projects. We're delighted that you've joined us today for the first of a two-part series that's going to explore ways that states can promote alignment, equity, and inclusion across their workforce system. And today in particular, we'll focus on the topic which seems to be both the cause of and solution of all workforce system challenges, and that's data. This series originated from a set of briefing papers soon to be released from the LEAD Center that highlight innovations and promising practices for disability inclusion within the workforce system currently underway in states across the country. With WIOA state plan modification efforts in full swing, we wish to elevate such practices that will help workforce leaders to achieve the common goal of providing quote unquote pathways to prosperity for everyone, just to paraphrase the legislation for what I promise will be the first and last time today. So before we go further, let's conduct some brief housekeeping. And if we can go to the next slide, please. So to ensure everyone can participate fully in today's webinar, we'd like to take a moment to share some captioning and housekeeping tips. Today's webinar is live captioned, and the captions appear below the slide deck. You also have the option to open the captioning webpage in a new browser, and the link's been posted in the chat, or will be momentarily, by one of my excellent colleagues working behind the scenes today. Once the captioning window opens on your own system, you can adjust the background color, the text color, the fonts using the drop-down menus at the top of the browser window, etc. We suggest you position the window to sit right on top of the embedded captioning that will allow you to see the screen itself as well as the captions at the same time. Next slide, please. We really encourage you to ask any questions that you might have about the content that we covered today. At any point, you can click the Q&A button that's located on the webinar's menu bar, and this will bring up a Q&A panel or a window into which you can type questions for our presenters. And we'll save time at the end for questions and answers. If you're experiencing any technical issues or have questions for the technical support team, click the raise hand button that's on the menu bar, and we'll respond to you directly. Next slide, please. And to kick off our day today, I'd like to say hello to Chris Button. She's a supervisory policy advisor with the Office of Disability Employment Policy at the U.S. Department of Labor. And she's a core member of the ODEP team that's guiding, shaping, or supporting basically all of our LEAD Center initiatives. So Chris, let me turn it to you.
Thank you so much, Caleb. On behalf of the Office of Disability Employment Policy and our Assistant Secretary, Taryn Williams, I want to welcome everyone to today's webinar. Today, we're going to hear about innovation in state data systems from 2 states who offer to share what they're doing with us. We appreciate hearing about this innovation because we understand how essential data is to capture the impact of what we're doing. This is also especially important for people with disabilities, for other people with barriers to employment, and also for those from historically marginalized communities. So I want to thank everyone for being here today. I want to thank our speakers from Indiana and Kentucky. I want to thank our attendees, and I certainly want to thank our LEAD Center staff for the great job that they do in helping us to advance disability within the context of WIOA. Finally, I want to thank our colleagues at the Employment and Training Administration for working with ODEP to make sure that we are focused on disability data within WIOA implementation. And so, Caleb, back to you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Chris. Really appreciate it. Let's go to the next slide. Wonderful. And I'll take a quick moment to introduce myself too. My name's Caleb Van Docto, and I'm with Social Policy Research Associates, or SPR. And we're, as I indicated earlier, we're part of the LEAD Center team. And I'm really fortunate to be joined today by 2 exceptional speakers. I can attest to from personal conversations with them that I've had over the last few days and weeks. And they're experts in the world of data in particular. So in a few minutes, we're going to hear from Jessica Cunningham, who leads the Kentucky Center on Statistics in her role as executive director. And then in a little bit, we'll hear from Carol Rogers at Indiana University's Business Research Center. And Indiana Research Center is a critical data partner that's supporting Indiana's workforce data system, where Carol's the co-director and the chief information officer. So thank you, both of you, for joining us. Next slide, please. Setting forth some modest objectives today, we know that data systems enable workforce agencies and their partners operating under the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act to understand how people move through education and training programs and into the labor market. And during our time together today, we're going to share a few data management practices that are in use currently that are helping states to do just that. So from our presenters, we're going to talk about a few specific practices, innovations in many respects, that help promote equity and inclusion for people with disabilities in the workforce system. And these are going to include how states can engage employer partners in the collection and use of workforce data, how one might collect occupational level data and use it to develop targeted and more accurate career pathways, and how states can advance data sharing partnerships with required and non-required agencies that all provide employment services. Next slide, please. So as I just mentioned, data systems really enable us to understand how people move through programs and into, ideally, fulfilling jobs and careers that benefit their lives. Through linking systems and sharing data, states can remove redundant processes that gather more accurate information, as well as develop longitudinal systems that can benefit individuals, communities, and policies. For example, quality data can generate insights into how people learn and advance and help stakeholders understand which programs and interventions are most helpful. Longitudinal data can help support policy and process evaluations. Data systems can help education and workforce leaders improve policy, as well as program design and administration. And integrated systems can generate data that benefits businesses, customers, educators, and program staff. And also, just to point out the coronavirus in the room, even with recent social, economic, and health-related challenges, the notion of what's possible in data systems has really changed over the last year. Workforce agencies across the country are finding ways to share and secure data remotely, and professionals working both in the background and also on the front line are serving customers confidentially from home offices or in virtual spaces. In general, and in keeping with the spirit of WIOA, states are working towards integrated and accessibility and moving away from data silos and system rigidity. And these efforts to date really offer opportunities for us all to learn from each other and to build towards a more inclusive world. So it's part of just what kind of makes this topic super exciting and super relevant. Can we go to the next slide, please? So as part of our research for a forthcoming set of briefs that the LEAD Center will be putting out, the LEAD Center conducted an analysis of the 2020 WIOA state plans for all 50 states and 6 territories. And we did that really to uplift practices and innovations that support the inclusion of and outcomes for people with disabilities. Perhaps not surprisingly for folks that are in this room today, we found several states that are currently focused on the coordination and sharing of data. And I'm going to turn to our presenters in a moment who represent 2 of those states. Through the analysis, we uncovered many cases where states are specifically targeting their data efforts because of the potential benefits for people with disabilities. But even if people with disabilities are not called out specifically, we really found that a number of practices in use currently still promote equity and inclusion. And there's just a few examples here that I wanted to specifically call out that are states are taking or undertaking or could undertake. So for example, providing universal data access, for instance, through things like public-facing data dashboards, or using management systems, data management systems that automate services for job seekers, such as automated scheduling or data sharing as they progress through their programs. States are capturing occupational level data. We're going to hear more specifically about that in a few moments. States are partnering with agencies that can provide employment related data, which is obviously very, very relevant to ensuring that everybody can reach their employment goals. In some cases, states are using third-party data labs as what are, in essence, data sharing intermediaries, and it's kind of a sidestep or a way to make the challenges that come with data sharing possible, and for varying agencies to be able to work together. States are also engaging partners on data design improvements, and that partnership engagement is so key to building the rapport and relationships with agencies and be able to forge long-term opportunities down the road for future data sharing opportunities. We'll hear more about that also from our partners later today. And then states are also updating policies and procedures or guidance that encourage data sharing. And all of these elements are things that we found are either in practice and are happening, or things that states may want to look at doing if they're not already doing as a way to really expand and improve their data systems. So now, to help us go just a little bit deeper into a couple of these strategies, I want to turn to our presenters. And I'm going to start with Jessica Cunningham, who's from the Kentucky Center on Statistics. And Jessica, actually, I have a very early question for you, which is, should we say KY Stats or Kentucky Center for Statistics? What's the right way to refer to your agency?
KY Stats sounds good.
Great. Okay, that's what I've been using, but I didn't want to overuse it in the intro if that was not the right way to refer to it. So, Jessica and KY Stats.
Great. Thank you, Caleb. Do you mind to move to the next slide? Thank you. Hi, everybody. Great to see you this afternoon. I'm Jessica Cunningham. I'm the Executive Director at the Kentucky Center for Statistics, otherwise known as KY Stats. We house our Kentucky Longitudinal Data System and our Labor Market Information Office. If you don't mind to move to the next slide, please. We are legislatively authorized. I'm going to do a brief intro first about kind of what we do, because I think it kind of leads into the examples that I'm going to share with you today. We're legislatively authorized to collect certain data in our states, that being our K-12, post-secondary, our unemployment insurance, our financial aid, the Kentucky Higher Education Assistance Authority. So those are kind of our core partners that we're legislatively authorized to collect in legislation. However, we do have partners that have data integrated into our system that are non-required by legislation. So we're going to talk a little bit about what some of those data sources are. Some of those being vocational rehabilitation, the SNAP, TANF, Medicaid, and so forth and so on. If you don't mind to move to the next slide, please. So as Caleb mentioned in his intro, people are not served in silos in the state, and so therefore we cannot have our data in silos. So in Kentucky, we're very fortunate to have a very robust longitudinal data system where we have a lot of these data sources that are collected in different agencies, integrated and linked so that we can look at outcomes over time. I know this is very difficult to see, so I'm going to kind of go through some of the sources that are listed, but it's kind of just a high-level view of our system, and it's supposed to be a little overwhelming to show you how robust our system is. As I mentioned before, we have data from birth all the way through the workforce in our system. Being K-12, which I mentioned as one of our board members, post-secondary. We also have our Labor Market Information Office, which I mentioned. We have our unemployment insurance, which provides our wage and claims data. We have a lot of our Department of Workforce Investment data, which is a lot of our workforce training, voc rehab, some of the focus and job seeker career center type data, and apprenticeships. We also have our adult education. We also have revenue, which kind of gives the blind spot of those that are self-employed that might not be covered by UI. We have recently added our Cabinet for Health and Family Services data, which includes our SNAP, TANF, some of our early learning data, some vital statistics, and so forth and so on. You know, we used to be known, many of you might know us as the Kentucky Center for Education and Workforce Statistics, KCEWS. But in July of 2018, we changed our name to the Kentucky Center for Statistics because we had gone beyond just the education and workforce linked data, as you can see in this slide. We now have corrections data. And so I mentioned a lot of these data sources to show you that we in Kentucky realize that, you know, to be able to look at a lot of the equity issues and barriers in our state, we need to be able to have these linked data sources across these agencies to be able to better serve the people of our state. Next slide, please. I'll tell you a little bit about our governing board. So as you see here, our chair is the Secretary for the Education and Workforce Development Cabinet. We have the Commissioner of the Kentucky Department of Education, which is our K-12 agency, the President of the Council on Post-Secondary Education, the Executive Director for the Kentucky Higher Education Assistance Authority, which is our financial aid office in our state, and the Secretary for the Cabinet for Health and Family Services. And as you notice that the board members that are listed here are, you know, a small subset of everything that's encompassed in our system. So what we do as a part of making our research agenda, which has an equity priority over the next 2 years, is that we include a representative from each of our data partners on our research agenda advisory committee so that we come up with the important questions for our state and making sure that we're leveraging the longitudinal data system in the right way to inform our state. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to go into a couple of examples of reports and how we use this linked data in our state, one being our career and technical education. You see 2 images here, and hopefully maybe I can get the support staff to potentially put our website into the chat. If not, I can do it when I get done presenting, but it's kystats.ky.gov. And you can click on reports and you can find everything that I'm going to go over here today. But what you see here are 2 different images of 2 different reports. One being the Career and Technical Education Employer Connector. And what this report does is that it looks at, you know, potential 12th grade enrollees in CTE, co-op eligible CTE enrollees by industry sector and location, so that employers can be connected with students that are available for potential, you know, job hiring or co-op internships and so forth and so on. The other image that you see here is our Career and Technical Education Feedback Report. And so here you can drill down the data here where the completers, be it overall or with industry certificates or with work-based learning experience, or just some CTE experience at all, connected with our post-secondary and workforce data to see their post-secondary enrollments post kind of that CTE credential, and then also maybe their workforce outcomes post that CTE credential. And you can also drill down by pathway. And on the last tab, you'll see that you can kind of connect by training locations and the actual labor market demand in our state by CTE pathway. This is actually in legislation in the state of Kentucky that every 2 years we look at the actual labor market demand and align the CTE pathways at a regional basis across our state to that labor market demand. We are currently doing a pilot with advanced CTE, looking at some CTE equity index and so forth and so on. So I think that that kind of fits here. And, you know, as I said, equity priority is a priority in our next research agenda. So we'll be looking to drill down more and look at those equity and inclusion metrics within this career and technical education pathway. I'll move to the next slide, please, if you don't mind. So this right here was actually something that was funded through the WDQI grant. It's our Kentucky Workforce Dashboard. And so what this includes is basically performance metrics for all of our local workforce areas. And they had, we had a lot of stakeholder engagement meetings to lead up to this work, to where they were picking metrics that they wanted to be able to compare across local workforce areas to show whether they were kind of moving the needle from a workforce perspective in the state of Kentucky. The outcome groups that are included in this dashboard are labor market health, which include things like workforce participation rate, UI duration, UI rate, and you can drill down at your specific local workforce area. We also have adult education metrics, which include your GED, graduation rates in those areas, and then also the percent of adults without a high school diploma. We have customer outcome metrics, which include apprenticeships, KCTCS, which is our community and technical education system in our state, and CTE credentials, and how many of those are earned at the local workforce areas, and then also job placements. The next outcome group is the employer metrics, so engagement in our career centers, the number offering apprenticeships, and the number receiving training incentives by local workforce area. And also those repeat customers of employers who are repeating, coming to those career centers to get hirees. And then finally, our workforce funding. So really things like WIOA, Perkins, adult education, what we call Bluegrass State Skills, which is another funding source in our state, and then our KCTCS trains. If you don't mind to move to the next slide. But in this Kentucky Workforce Dashboard, a lot of the conversation really went around, can we drill down and look at some of the currently underserved populations in our state so that we can better leverage the funding that we have both at a state and a federal level. And so what you see here is the second tab, where we're actually showing the number of these specific populations in our state, so that local workforce boards can start having the conversation of leveraging those funds to better serve the people of the Commonwealth. Some of these drilled down subpopulations that we identified in our state that were things that we wanted to be able to see were unemployed persons, persons with a disability, veterans, foreign-born, homeless, and foster youth. We also want to be able to drill down to justice involvement, which we can in an adult right now, but we're working on the juvenile justice piece, recovery individuals, and the underemployed. Next slide, please. So that being said, we talked about some required and non-required, partners that submit data on an annual basis to our office. Adult education is one of those. And so in part of that conversation, what we try to do with all of our data partners is to provide a value add back to them. So we have specific feedback reports where we are connecting their particular data source with what makes sense for them. So for instance, from an adult education standpoint, we try to look at, those who earn a GED. Do they go on to post-secondary, or what are some of their workforce outcomes? What are the industries that they are employed in? What are their employment retention rates, and so forth and so on. And of course, we try to align those metrics to some of their federal reporting requirements, be it WIOA or Perkins. So with that being said, I'll stop with those examples and I'll turn it over to Caleb and wait for questions at the end. Thank you.
Jessica, thanks so much. And the information and images and data are just so beautifully displayed and obviously useful for folks. So it's just such a treat to see. Thanks for sharing that with us. And I can already see questions starting to come in that we'll need to circle back on. So we will get back to that. But for the moment, I just want to turn it now over to Carol Rogers at the Business Research Center at Indiana University. Carol, And you're going to tell us a little bit, talk a little bit about something a little bit differently than the merging of data from various agencies into systems. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Caleb. And Jessica, I always learn something. You guys are amazingly productive and really tie in so well with what people in Kentucky, whether workforce professionals, legislators, employers, job seekers, you're really in tune with what it is that they're asking for, and always very impressive. We always learn from you. One thing, there is one little thing though that we're doing in Indiana that many states are not currently doing, and Jessica's nodding her head. We are now collecting occupation, job titles, based on the standard occupational classification with our wage records. And so, as Caleb mentioned, I'm going to do something a little bit different. Jessica was wonderfully holistic. I'm going to look at a sliver of what we're doing in Indiana, but I first wanted to let you know that on this first slide, I'm showing you what our state workforce development agency's mission is. And I think it's worth reading. And I'm happy to say what it is because they want to connect people and employers. Notice they put people first. I think that's always very important. I like it when I see businesses and government put people first. And to bring them together through engagement where they are being transparent and accountable about how they're spending taxpayer dollars and that they are meeting the obligations that are set down for those dollars, including with WIOA. But what they also hone in on is that they want to celebrate, value, and prioritize equity, inclusion, and diversity. And this is really one of the better mission statements that I've seen with a government agency in a long time. Now, if some of you have good mission statements that either your agencies have or that you've seen, share them with us, because I think those words, prioritizing equity, inclusion, and diversity, need to be front and center. And so what I'm going to talk with you about today in terms of collecting occupation data really revolves around trying to tie the job to the skills, to the people who can get those skills and do those jobs, in many ways, regardless of disability, but being aware that we can tailor our job matching based on the kind of jobs that are conducive to different types of skills and abilities that we all have. So next slide. Thank you, Caleb. I hesitate giving you orders. I should just raise my hand in my head or something.
No, please do. You're good.
Okay. Well, just going back to basics, everyone, we were frustrated in Indiana because we didn't have what we considered good occupation data. And when I say good, what I mean is granular, local level data. I tip my hat off to the Bureau of Labor Statistics every day at the amazing work they do. But the occupational employment statistics are available annually. They're available for our states and our larger metro areas. But we are deluged every day by employers and economic developers who really want to understand more locally what are the job types of jobs that people hold in this community and what does my labor supply look like. So we decided, even though for many years we had tried this with the legislature, with the governor, with the agency, we finally got a commissioner who was willing to walk out on that limb a bit, basically in order to get better data, and request that employers submit this SOC code with their unemployment insurance filings. And so what I'm showing here is really just that quarterly calendar that they go through, so that every quarter they're submitting this data. And we began doing this in the third quarter of 2019. And we now have over 50% of our employers participating. Next slide. So what are the benefits of getting the occupational data? Well, one of the things that we had to do was really make our case, first to the commissioner, then to the UI folks who needed to do all of the coding to modify the system to be able to do this. And we also helped them with that, my office did. But we definitely were able to sell them on the fact that this was going to tie workers directly to the types of skills that they have. And that is something that workforce investment boards had been begging for. This type of information is so critical to understanding labor supply and being able to see what the shifting patterns were in terms of welders versus nurses. I don't know about Kentucky, Jessica, or other states that are listening today, but we do a great job in Indiana training nurses and losing nurses. So we train them, and a very large number of them go to Cincinnati and Louisville. So they're going outside of our state, and these data can help us understand that better. Next slide. So we had a couple of goals that we had to meet, which was, first of all, to persuade employers. So we spent a year prepping employers through engaging with trade associations, with the workforce investment boards themselves, because a number of them have employers sitting on them, and then actually going to both large and small employers, chambers of commerce throughout the state to tell them about what we were going to do. It was really helpful that we got the State Chamber of Commerce and our Indiana Manufacturers Association on side to help us make this case, because they were resistant. You know, it's that respondent burden, right? You know, you just can't keep telling people answer more and more and more questions. So we were able to get to the point where we began this, but we also knew we were going to have to validate it. And we had built, as part of our WDQI round 6 funding, what we call an occupation assignment engine, which is a pretty massive model that we built that essentially can assign directly through public licensing data that we have, through the employer submitted codes, other means, and through indirect means, an occupation to a wage record. And we now use that as a validation because, in case you're shocked, some people aren't quite as accurate in submitting the codes. Caleb and Jessica are smiling at me. Human nature being what it is. So we do have a way to validate it. Next slide. Excuse me. So we engaged directly with the employers. We let them know what we were doing. We took a tool that NASWA built called OCCUPATIONAL, and we tailored that tool for our purposes and made it available to the employers. In fact, it's available to anybody, anywhere. It's a web tool on the Hoosiers by the Numbers website. And you can go in and you can either put in the word welder and get a SAW code, or you can do a whole bunch at once and just copy and paste in an Excel file, and it'll come back with the codes assigned to it. The employee is very heavily used by our employers. And we also built, as what we called an employer incentive, we built a dashboard for the employers who actually provide the SAW code. So this is a thank you, and it's a dashboard that is persistently updated. We remind them of it once a month. We're hoping to have a button inside the employer self-service tool where they can also start getting one that shows their staffing pattern, literally for their company, compared to the regional staffing pattern for their industry. But guess what happened in 2020? COVID. Unemployment went through the roof. Nobody was going to be able to do any of that programming within the UI system. So we've kind of got that on hold, but that's going to be a sweet spot for us where they can literally see that and then also start showing them availability of workers. And this is where I think it's key for the disabled and underserved populations. We want to start exposing employers to the kinds of jobs that they have that are very conducive with people who are differently abled. And I think that may be my last slide, or did I have a screenshot I think I wanted to share?
I think there's a few more actually.
Okay, so this is what the dashboard looks like. We show staffing patterns, wages, unemployment claims, and training opportunities for them to understand are available. And we also direct them to our regional analysts. We're one of very few states, I think, that still have locally situated labor market analysts. So we have folks in each of those regions, and they specialize in those regions, and we have special web components tailored for each region and expose many of the things that you do, Jessica. Some of them not quite as in-depth yet. We're still aspiring to do things that you do, but that's one of the ways we can reach people. Next slide. I already mentioned, I got ahead of myself, how we got slowed down by COVID. And there has been this huge thirst for labor market data everywhere. Tell me how many people are available to work. Tell me why they're not working. Why is our participation rate going down? Where can I find workers? How can I be sure that I'm attracting everybody who can work? Again, this is an area I think that Caleb, you and your group, along with Chris, can help us to tune these products to those populations so that they can get as much value out of them as possible. Next slide. And what's next? The login version of the dashboard. We really need to up our game on wage trends. And looking at credential data, we want to tie the credentials now to those wage records as well with the occupation, and get to where Jessica's going, which is with the career pathways. And let's look at how we can show what career pathways are conducive to people who with disabilities, and make that more visible. Right, Caleb?
Yeah, very much so. And maybe it's a little bit cheating because, I pocketed this particular question for when we get to Q&A, but I know we're going to be going to Q&A soon. So that's perhaps maybe even kind of like almost a question back to you, or thinking about, I think we've seen over, decades at this point, the notion that particular subpopulations of individuals might have an affinity for particular types of occupations. I'm thinking in particular around neurodiverse communities and the notion of some occupations where it's like, oh, this particular job could be really great for the particular skill sets that we see in this, and then blanket general statement about a group of people. And so we don't, there's a lot of speculation, and there's a lot of generalization that's happening in those sorts of statements. And it seems like being able to actually collect occupational data could help us perhaps answer some of those questions or debunk myths about certain types of people are good at certain types of jobs. Is there more that you can say to that?
Well, I think you're spot on with that. Let's see where we can show employers how people with different types of disabilities are perfectly able to do these types of jobs, and really tie the skills and abilities together in a much more transparent way with people who are willing to work, who want to work, but wind up being, should I say, invisible very often to employers. And try to get that in front of employers through things like these dashboards that we're doing. And I'd love to talk with you more, and with anybody else participating today, about maybe ways that we can take the ONET KSAs and start bridging those to these different abilities and see where they match up.
And if you could spell out that KSA acronym for us.
I am so sorry. Shame on you. Knowledge, skills, and abilities.
Great, perfect. Thanks so much. And for folks that also saw WDQI go by earlier as well, that's the Workforce Data Quality Initiative. Also, and we'll drop, if it hasn't already happened, we'll drop a link or two into the chat about what that is if folks are interested in learning more and are unfamiliar with it.
Thank you so much, Caleb.
Wonderful. Yeah, thanks so much, Carol. I appreciate that. And same to you, Jessica. I think that, this conversation is so relevant and it's so fascinating and can be really useful to other states that are really grappling with some of these same challenges about building out partnerships and relationships with both required and non-required WIOA partners, as well as being able to get at a more accurate window at what the people that we're serving, the employers that we're serving, and how to make those matches more effective. Let's go to the next slide, because we now have a few minutes to actually do some Q&A and answer questions that have come in. There's already a short stack of questions that we have, so I'll encourage anybody, now is the perfect opportunity to drop your question in, and we may be able to get to it before our time ends here. I want to start with Jessica. Actually, there's a question early on asking about how do you relay a value add to the data owner when you bring in new data into your system. So going back to, I think this is going back to that big system graphic that you had on the slide, where you're bringing in all of these different partners who are providing data to KY Stats. So how do you relay, when folks give data or bring data to KY Stats, how do you relay that value add back to the data owner when you bring them on?
Sure. Thanks, Caleb. First, I'd like to mention, Carol, I'm always so envious whenever I see that you have SOC codes in that UI data, so that you can really connect and say whether, people are working in field and be able to connect that supply demand gap. So very envious, great presentation. So back to the value add of the data partners and communicating that to them. What we always start when we are trying to discuss, adding data to our system to a new partner is we want it to be a two-way street. So it has to be a value add not only to us and the state, but also to them. Are there ways that we can leverage this data, if integrated with these other sources, to answer questions that they can't already answer, like employment outcomes? Or can we decrease their work capacity in terms of administrative data that they collect, like self-reported employment or something like that, that we can use our actual employment data to populate those fields for reporting for them, that kind of alleviates some of that collection.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Jessica. And let me send one over that we've gotten into Carol specifically. Could you speak a little bit about employers' willingness or perhaps resistance to submitting occupational codes? I don't know if you can go in even perhaps a little bit more in depth, but feel free to go in, because I think we do have an audience that has some knowledge in the data space. It seems like from some of the questions that are coming in. How did that conversation happen, and how did you get the employer buy-in?
That's a great question, because both things happened. There was resistance and there was acceptance, and it wasn't always broken down, say, by large employer versus small employer. Some large employers were more than happy. Others, depending on what payroll vendor they had for their pay, because a lot of times, for the large employers, they're just going to have their payroll vendor provide them with the file. And depending on the payroll vendor, we would get pushback if the vendor was telling the employer, we're going to have to charge you more money to be able to do this. We wound up being able to convince many of the people who are doing it, and we've been really thrilled with the health systems participation. Manufacturing has been excellent, and I think some of that has to do with the one-on-one meetings that we had with people, as well as the regional meetings that we had. So we really got out and about. Thank God COVID wasn't going on in 2018, because we did a lot of talking, and we were convincing. We kept it simple. We told them we would have tools for them to aid them in assigning those SOC titles. We had call-in people that they could call. So we had a call center approach type thing, and they could call about it. So it was a lot of HR people, payroll services people, bookkeepers, and we would just walk them through. I make it sound like I walked them through it. I didn't do it personally. But the folks who were doing that work at the department did a really good job. We still have some resistors, though. What we're trying to do is push out more examples of what employers could learn about their labor pool if they would do this. Because that's a pretty easy connection for them to make. Oh, if I share this, then I'm going to be able to know more about my labor supply.
Yeah, that's great. And just kind of picking up on that just a little bit, has there been, like, have you seen specific benefits that employers have come back and said, oh, because of this, I was able to X, Y, or Z?
No,
okay.
I haven't, but that doesn't mean that hasn't happened. I'll have to check with the business division, the folks that work directly with businesses all the time, and I'll find out about that. That's a good question.
But sure, but the notion that they actually have, you have, over 50% employer participation, you've obviously hit some kind of critical mass. Are there also particular regions or industries where you tend to see more participation or engagement than others? Or are there industries that you're trying to target that you're trying to get more, get plugged into a little bit better?
We did notice that our northern and central parts of the state had the greater participation. In terms of the industries, I think I mentioned manufacturing has been really great. Retail trade, not so much. Food and accommodation, not so much. Certainly one could understand some of that, and especially for small innkeepers, independently owned restaurants, things like that. One of the things that we do know, though, is that with that employer dashboard, when we've started alerting them that this was available, we probably get about 20,000 hits a month on those dashboards. And so that did tell us that there was some hunger there for the data.
Great. Thanks so much. Let me turn back to Jessica. So she's not just twiddling her thumbs the entire time and probably nodding along as we go. Jessica, so a question that came in from the Q&A, a great plan by shining the light on pathways. I'm just going to recite it here just to make sure I get it right. So great plan on shining the light on pathways based on what is established locally as a demand. But how is demand determined in the first place?
Yeah, so the demand that's referenced there are the projected demand produced by the Labor Market Information Office that is then submitted to the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Great. Okay, and then a quick follow-up on that as well, or adjacent to that as well, is do you have examples of benefits that you've seen that surprised you that perhaps you didn't anticipate, especially for data providers where inclusion is a key priority? I'm thinking about, adult education or corrections, et cetera.
Yeah, so I think probably there, it's really, it really having that integrated data and I'll use our vocation rehabilitation office in specifically. So, we can take some of our tools that we may make for a broader audience. And when we have conversations or we train specific agencies to maybe talk to their clients or customers about particular job openings or things like that, like our Career Explorer tool, we really learn a lot about how they are using the tool and how they can use it to maybe advise or connect specific populations to job opportunities. And I think you alluded a little bit to it as well, Caleb, in terms of, can you really look at actual workforce outcomes of, say, specific populations to see what particular fields and such that they might be best suited for. And I think that's definitely possible, especially in the realm of what Carol is doing in terms of collecting those SOC codes.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about what you see coming next. It's actually kind of a question for both of you too. Yeah, and
go first.
Yeah.
Well, one person had mentioned in the chat that Indiana's not requiring them. So no, we are not using a stick. We're using a carrot for this. And part of that was there still was some trepidation that if there was a huge employer pushback and they all started falling on their legislators, who would then go with pitchforks and whatever to the governor, that could kill it, right there. And so we did opt. The commissioner opted to do we aren't requiring it, but they don't say it's optional, and they don't say it's required. So the employer figures out that, oh, you're not going to refuse my payment of taxes this quarter because I
Right.
so.
Great. Another question that came in through the chat, I think this is for Jessica in particular, but how did you determine underserved groups? How are underserved groups determined?
Yeah, so it was kind of an intersection of a lot of things. So, maybe those identified by, say, WIOA or Perkins funding, but then also by our stakeholders who were a part of our local workforce boards and our state leaders. They came together and identified 9 specific, what they felt like were underserved populations that we needed to dive into as a state and be able to provide outcomes for.
Great, thanks so much. And I'm taking a look at the clock here. I know we don't really have too much more time, but let me ask just one more that we still have in the Q&A here. Also, it's directed at Jessica, but does integrated data result in integrated service response in meeting business needs from your perspective?
Not always. So I say this all the time, and integrated data systems, the data are only the beginning of the conversation. It's really how you use the data and the conversations that go afterwards with that integrated data and those outcomes that are key. Otherwise, it's just an IT project. And so I think that really critical to these integrated data efforts are those conversations between, say, the data people and the service and programmatic and people who are making decisions about funding and programmatic decisions and so forth and so on. That is key to really making a difference.
Great, thanks so much. And Carol, just to be fair, did you have any final comments or anything that you wanted to make as well?
No, I'm good.
Great. Okay, so I'm grateful for the questions. Of course, there's more questions that always come in as well, just so for participants, if questions do come to you later, or even if you're watching this recording down the line, when you're taking a look at the materials that are posted next week, we will post these to the Lead Center next week. You're welcome to email us and we'd be delighted to hear from you. And our email contact information is coming in just a moment. Let's go to the next slide, please. And before we go, I do want to share just a set of resources. Some of them have popped up in the chat already, but certainly not all of them. I know that these are, you can see the links, but you can't actually see the URLs. Some of them are long and would be a little unwieldy anyway, but as I indicated, our slide materials and recording and the transcript will all be posted to the Lead Center next week, and you'll be able to download them and have access to these links as well. These are a set of resources that and information that was discussed today by the presenters and in the Q&A. It includes Indiana's Workforce Economic Dashboard and a collection of tools from KY Stats. And can we go to the next slide, please? And here is the Lead Center, where we have a robust library of resources and information that's all freely available. We also have a regular newsletter that can keep you up to speed on new and relevant information as it comes out. So we encourage you to sign up there. And lastly, I also want to, or second to lastly, I should say, I want to just send a reminder that this is, as you recall, the part 1 of a part 2 series on WIOA system alignment, the second of which is going to be happening on January 19th. You can register for that at our Lead Center website as well. And at that webinar, we'll be diving into cross-system coordination and programmatic accessibility. Next slide, please. And then truly lastly is please do connect with us through almost all of the modern and hip social media ways that one can be: Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. We're on all of those and we regularly keep them updated. So do please connect with us there as well. Finally, I just want to say thank you so much to our presenters, to the support team that was just kind of going gangbusters in the background, silent for everybody up front. And of course, to all of you, all good health and good care out there. And we wish you the best. And we'll see you in about a week. Take care, everybody.